In this case, a fellow named John Charlesworth had been charged with bribing electors in the 1859 general election in the United Kingdom. Following that election, there had been a commission of inquiry into electoral fraud at the election, and one of the witnesses called before the commission of inquiry was Jose Fernandez. In order to get Fernandez to give his evidence, he was offered an immunity from prosecution for any bribery offences, and so he gave evidence to the commission. After the commission was concluded, Charlesworth was one of those charged, and Fernandez was again called on to give evidence, this time against Charlesworth. He was asked whether he received any money during the election from Charlesworth. He refused to answer on the grounds that such evidence may serve to incriminate him. The judge reassured him that the immunity from prosecution was still in place and he could not face any criminal sanctions, but he still refused to answer. Ultimately, the judge committed him to jail for 6 months for contempt of court. He challenged the decision to jail him for contempt. Now, most of the judgment is really about whether an assize judge had the power to jail for contempt, and a fair chunk of the judgment is written in law Latin or law French. Justice Willis was the only one to really look at the underlying question of whether Fernandez should have been compelled to give evidence. He said, "Every person in the kingdom except the sovereign may be called upon and is bound to give evidence to the best of his knowledge upon any question of fact, material and relevant to an issue tried in any of the Queen's courts, unless he can show some exception in his favour, such, for instance, as that suggested to exist in this case, namely that to answer might put him in peril of criminal proceedings." This statement has now become the basis for the modern rule, stated much more succinctly, that every person who is competent to give evidence is also compellable to give evidence. If a person is competent to give evidence, then they must do so if they are called upon to do so, or else they may be punished for contempt.